Hello and welcome back to Insights with NetSupport Corporate Edition. I'm your host, Cauchi, and today I'm really excited to be welcoming Rebekah onto the show. Hi, Rebekah. How are you? How's your week been?
Hi, yeah, I'm really, really good. It's been a great week. I had an event this week actually on women's health in the workplace, so very topical.
Yeah, so exciting. Absolutely.
But yeah, no, it's been a great week. Feeling good. How about you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Yeah, another really good week. So I think we were both saying before, though, that we've had so much busyness, we kind of need a break now, but it's been busy in a good way, hasn't it?
Yeah, busy in a good way for sure.
Yeah. So before we dive into anything else, would you mind just introducing yourself a bit to our listeners, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi everyone. I am Rebekah Lloyd. I am the founder of This Independent Life, which is a social impact education platform where I specialize in women's health education and events. But I also do a lot of different things all under the umbrella of women's health, including consultancy, partnering with research. I do a lot of advocacy, anything related to women's health, to be honest, you name it, I've probably touched it at some point. So yeah, but I started my organization just over, well, I guess depending on when you're listening to this, in February 2022. And before that, I'd worked in advertising, but also in, again, various different organizations, mainly in healthcare, but also, studied medical science, worked in research for a bit, worked in the NHS for a bit, traveled a bit, worked in ski resorts for a bit. So was never really someone that knew exactly what they wanted to do out of the gate. I think that's probably so now, but yeah, I don't know if I can go into more of my story and background, or we can come to that after.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, actually. Yeah, and it'd be really nice just to kind of see where that passion comes from. I always think that's really interesting.
Yeah, so I'm an open book, so really always happy to go, I don't know, I think it's really important to be vulnerable and honest about experiences. I think language and
nice that it comes from a place of authenticity as well, then when you're
yeah,
and about theirs too.
Yeah, no, exactly. So in 2021, after I'd been running the London office of an independent agency, so had joined before COVID. It was a startup. I was a founding member, joined when it was a kind of small team, and was able to have that opportunity to kind of build a team here, was working internationally. I had clients all over the world. Really, really loved it, and it was amazing. And then COVID happened, and I think similar to what happened for a lot of people, right? Like, I think it was an opportunity to kind of reflect and pause and think about, okay, do I actually enjoy what I'm doing in my career? I think a lot of times, we go to school, we leave school, we get a job, we get another job, get a promotion, maybe we move somewhere else, but we kind of stay in this lane. And I think if we want to move out of that or do something different, it's really hard. And actually, I don't think we're really given those tools to even know how to navigate that. So
that probably was one benefit of the pandemic and everything else, is it really did make you reflect on what was important and what mattered, especially when you were sort of in this position where there was so little you could do apart from work, and you could really think about your priorities a bit more, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, I think, I wasn't able to work with my team every day. I had a big team both in the UK and also around the world. We were already working remotely, to be honest, so that wasn't really a thing for me. But actually not being able to travel and have that interaction with my clients and with my team, and just really questioning, at a wider scale, what am I doing with my life? I think, to be honest, a bit of an existential crisis, and really actually becoming it was becoming a situation where it was becoming more toxic as well, really long hours. It just wasn't sustainable. And so at that time, what was also happening, that at the time I had totally normalized, is I was also living in chronic pain. So I'd had it for many, many years, but over the course of it, it gotten to the point where every day I was in pain, just all day, every day, pelvic pain. And I totally normalized that. And it was actually my partner that was this isn't normal. We need to do something about this now. It's
quite scary that you'd actually normalized it as well, that you had got to that point where you're just it's nothing, it's just normal every day. life.
Yeah, exactly. And I think and now I'm able to look back, right, with the benefit of hindsight. Actually, through the work that I do now, I speak to a lot of people who have been through a similar experience, and it's devastating in some ways how common it is. Actually, I think of a really intense work environment and struggling with my health, but then also, you know, I just bought my first house, so now I had a mortgage, so it's like I can't just quit my job whenever I want. Also, I had health insurance, you know, at the time, and depending on where you're listening to this, but if you're in the UK with the NHS, and I used to work in the NHS, my mum's a nurse, my sister's a doctor, like there's amazing things about it, but it is also broken, you know, it's not
of course,
operate as it should be. And so, you know, being on waiting lists for years and all those kind of things at that time, I honestly couldn't see my life moving forward if I wasn't able
to. Completely understandable.
Completely burnt out, basically had a full-on mental health breakdown as well. So all these things were happening with my health. Actually got a diagnosis of endometriosis, which again, you can only get that through surgery. My work wouldn't let me have time off for surgery. And there was just things that kept happening. And I was like, okay, this is crazy. Enough is enough now. But I was also starting to speak to a lot of women. It's quite broad. And like, whenever I share this story, it's a bit kind of all over the place. But actually, that's kind of intention. That's kind of what led me to what I'm doing now, in that actually, as women, or as anyone, frankly, this can apply really to anybody. We have our careers, you know, we're ambitious, or we're just kind of going about doing the career that we love and really wanting to do something that fulfills us, right? Whether that's in our work or otherwise, but doing something with our days and with our time that we really love. But we also need to have financial well-being and understanding, and like financial literacy, like investing, like knowing how to get a mortgage, like all of these things that I think we really take for granted, or at least I think a lot of people take for granted because they've just had it, and we're not really taught in school. So if you're not family, you're not taught it by traditional education, where are we getting that advice? And actually that combine them with our health. And yes, you hear things like health is wealth and health is the foundation. And I think that's really important. But if we're looking at these things siloed and not looking at the how those three areas of our health, our work, and our money interplay, we're not really able to, and this isn't meant to sound cheesy, but we're not really able to live the life that we want to live, because we're always going to be thinking about things as separate, totally interdependent. Like on the outside, I had an amazing job, earning the best salary I ever had, just bought my first house, everything was sunshine and roses. But on the inside, my health was shot. And I think it was because I had totally deprioritized, had just normalized being in pain, all of these different things.
Kind of siloed that off.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, and again, we can get into it, but I think there's a lot of deep-rooted institutional, you know, like sexism and what we've been taught as women around our bodies, around our health, around our position in society, that really prevails. And I think the only way that we can go about changing that and making positive change for the future is through supporting women at every stage of their life, and through all of these different, and also educating wider society, so that we're not just looking at it as like us and them. We're actually looking at the wider impact of women being sort of affected in these three core areas, whether it be leadership potential, ability to start businesses, knowing how to invest, you know, so many different areas. We weren't included in clinical trials until the 90s. So there's a huge data gap.
Crazy.
You know, 2% of funding for businesses goes to women, like only. There's so many stats that I could reel off to you, but I think all that to say, that is kind of what inspired me to start this independent life, and is why I'm so passionate about supporting women to ultimately just live the life that they want and should be able to live, without kind of being held back by any of these things. In a nutshell.
Absolutely.
A long introduction.
In a nutshell, it's a very long nutshell, but a very important nutshell. Yeah, no, thank you. That was a really important thing to be championing. So that's, yeah, you're awesome. But the first thing I really wanted to talk about is women's health education. Because I think, like you said before, there is a lot of this kind of stuff that's just not really talked about, and you don't really start looking into anything until, like you say, you're just like, oh, I'm in pain all of the time or something. Whereas actually, if there was really good education, you might understand that beforehand and start seeking treatment and things like that. So how can individuals and companies help women gain knowledge to help them take action with their health?
Yeah, so I love this question. And I mean, this is my bread and butter. So, so you can bring someone like me in. So whether you're listening to this as a leader in a company or an employee in an organization, I think there's a lot that can be done. And actually, I think companies can be a really amazing avenue for women to actually get access to the support they need, whether that's having someone come in to give a talk around the most common conditions, how to navigate the system, how to overcome dismissal and gaslighting, because unfortunately that is the reality for a lot of women, that, you know, it took me 10 years to get diagnosed for something that 10% of women. I mean, we shouldn't be having that.
You really shouldn't. And I've known it with plenty of women in the menopause and things as well, where it's been so dismissed that they could possibly be in early menopause or something else. Oh, it's just stress, it's just this, it's just that. And it makes it so much tougher, doesn't it, if you're having to keep fighting that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, you know, first and foremost, it is really about education. Like, for me, it always comes back to education. And if we're able to support women or people who are, you know, again, and this is where it comes back to, you can be a man, you can be a caregiver, you can be an ally, it doesn't really matter who you are. But we, at the very core, don't have an understanding of our bodies. We're not taught it in school. Yes, it's gotten a little bit better, but actually I think most of us are probably walking around not really fully understanding our bodies, what's happening, be it that our menstrual cycle, things like menopause, like you mentioned, knowing what's kind of, I don't like to use the term normal because obviously everyone's different, but what, you know, if there's something happening, for example, in pain all the time, and not just cyclically, like when, you know, I have pain every day and it doesn't have anything to do with my cycle. So I think, you know, things like that, where it's like, okay, that actually isn't what should be happening. But if we're not knowing what that basic thing is and we're not aware of those symptoms, I would like to think if I had someone come in and do a session at my work around, okay, here's the most common conditions, but actually how can you prepare for doctor's appointments, the conversations you need to have, both with your employer and with a physician. I think there's a lot of overlap when we look at our health and our careers, which again, some people are like, that's, you know, it's totally separate. For me, being able to advocate for yourself, asking for what you want, asking for what you need. Every single person on this planet is different. Every single person has had a different experience, and we need to be listening and learning how to, you know, put forward what it is we need and be comfortable with that. I think a lot of people are very happy to do that, but there are probably much more that are not, because again, it goes back to that way that we've been brought up in how we are, you know, perceived in the world, and the way that the position that we have. And so whether that's, you know, not speaking up for what we think is right, or giving our opinion, and, you know, people see this all the time. And again, there's so many stats that kind of back this up in the workplace. But really, I think for me, you know, educating people and going in, and that's what I do. I go into organizations, I give talks, whether it's a 1-hour session on navigating women's health, talking about, you know, what are the most common conditions, like endometriosis, PCOS, fibroids, you know, really kind of helping with that awareness, and then giving people practical knowledge and tips around what that means, the mental health impact as well, because that's something that we don't talk about much, and that's something that I'm deeply passionate about. Because if you're living with a health condition, of course you're going to have a knock-on effect to your mental health, and you know, so supporting that, and we're raising awareness about that as well. But also how to help people to prepare for appointments, to get the most out of their appointments. At the moment, we have people waiting for years, and I know this now from experience. Quitting my job and starting the business, you know, I don't have private health insurance anymore. I've been on waiting lists for years, still waiting for referrals to pain management clinics, pelvic floor therapy, like being told by the NHS a few weeks ago even that you've run out of options and there's nothing else to do other than get a hysterectomy. So for me, it's like, well, we need to be able to help people to navigate those conversations and not be at risk of, and again, this, you know, that route and that option is what's right for a lot of women, like taking that away. But actually we need to be informed so that we can make informed decisions about what is happening to our bodies, and then the knock-on effect and impact that has to our careers and our financial livelihood and well-being. So again, it kind of goes,
and understanding you've got choices within it. It's not just that you have to just give up on that, or, you know, go to the complete extreme.
Yeah, exactly. So whether it's kind of one-off talks, I also do talks on things like preventing burnout and conquering imposter syndrome, because again, I see those as very kind of overlap and interlinked. And actually recently, so one thing that I've started doing for organizations is, and again, this goes back to me, you know, listening and hearing of what people need, right? At the end of the day, I'm not just here to wave a flag and say we should all be caring about women's health. No, I really want to be making sure that I am creating impact through what I'm doing, and I am providing support for what is actually needed. And so I did an exercise over this year and a lot of research and development to really dive into women's health in the workplace specifically, and actually speaking with leaders within organizations as well as employees, and have put together a more comprehensive program now, which is really looking at educating, engaging, and empowering people in organizations. So yes, doing one-off talks, which can work really well for like a lunch and learn or something like that. But actually a lot of women were coming to me and saying, that's great, but it kind of feels a little bit one and done. Like, what do I do afterwards? Like, how can I talk about it? And actually, how can we continue the conversation? 100% of people that I spoke to said that they still felt there was a stigma in the workplace. So if you kind of extrapolate that across the country, there's thousands, millions of women who are feeling like they're not able to be their full self and get that support at work.
And advocate for what they need. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but I think it's also really important that we look at the sort of whole system in terms of supporting managers and really helping them to have conversations and how they can support people in their teams, how we can actually have group sessions where we're bringing people together for kind of peer sharing and learning. There's so much power that can come from being heard. And I know that through, I now run a support group as well. And that partly that is because I think it's so important for us to connect on a human level with other people that are going through a similar experience. And actually, and you hear this sometimes with like women's networks, a lot of companies have that, but it won't always kind of touch on women's health. And so, what I heard from my research and speaking to a lot of people is actually people really want that space to actually come together and just like talk and just share their experience. And it doesn't have to, be anything super fancy. It's just, let's get in a room, for an hour, whether it's once a month or once a quarter or however you want to do it, and just talk. And that's where it all starts, coming back to conversation. But then also things like women's health policies. I think menopause policies, we've seen a big shift, and I think it's great that we're moving in that direction. But actually, it kind of stops there for a lot of people. And so one thing I'm really passionate about, where I kind of support, is yes, menopause 100%, but there's also a lot of things that happen before the menopause, whether it is endometriosis, fibroids, or just struggling with periods. No one should be in and be living in pain and violence, period.
Yeah, and things like, going through IVF, or like there's so many different kind of health things that could be happening.
Exactly. So so also looking at things like women's health policies, and at the end of the day, like every company is different. Everyone's at a different stage and at a different level. And I'm really open and happy to supporting people wherever they're at, and also connecting to people who I know in my network. So I also have, partners that I work with and bring in, whether that be a nutritionist or, physicians, like really making sure that there's a tailored, curated experience so that the employees and the organization are really getting what they need based on where they're at. It's not necessarily a one size fits all when it comes to women's health. So I think that for me is what's most important when it comes to supporting companies with education.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you mentioned within that as well, it can be quite difficult for women to navigate the healthcare system. I mean, waiting lists and everything else aside, what is your advice for women in getting diagnosis and treatment for health conditions?
Yeah, so this is a great question, actually, and this is one of the main things that I do. So I think, and again, this comes from me working in the NHS and also like now working in various different parts of the system. So seeing it from both sides and having navigated it from both sides, I think first and foremost, it's really important to be prepared. So whether that be tracking your symptoms through an app, there's a lot of amazing apps out there now that you can use. I actually just use my notes. So like just even noting down like what's the date that I'm experiencing this, what am I experiencing? But yeah, there's a lot of amazing technology now that you can get out there. But however you do it, actually making a note of what is happening and what you're experiencing. And the reason I say that is because actually when you're thinking ahead, and this isn't to be negative, but the realities are there are a lot of people that will be dismissed, or, I was just said, oh, here's painkillers, off you go. And actually, no, we need to be able to say, no, I would really like to get a referral, and being able to have that conversation is a lot easier if you have evidence. So
because if you arm yourself with as much information as possible, it's kind of hard to argue with it, isn't it?
Exactly. So the second thing I would say is to know how to play the game. And again, that might sound a little bit weird, but we have to remember that when we are seeing an individual, whether it's a doctor or a nurse, we are seeing one very tiny portion of a very wide system. And there are a lot of things within those systems, a lot of barriers, a lot of challenges. and a lot of things that make up that whole, experience. And so by playing the game, what I mean is, for example, if you're not getting anywhere with your GP, you've said to them, look, I'm having this experience. You've taken all your evidence. You're saying that, you need help, right? Like, I don't know what's going on. I need you to do something about it. If you've got someone there who's flat out refusing to refer you to whether it's a gynecologist or whoever you want to see, then there's only so much you can do. And as much as there are a lot of people who are incredible, dedicated, genuinely fighting to provide the best care as possible for their patients, unfortunately, the reality is, like in any industry, right? Like there's some bad apples. So don't waste your energy. If you're at the stage where you're in chronic pain every day or whatever symptoms you might be experiencing, you don't have the energy to actually be fighting that. And actually, you shouldn't have to waste your time with that. And yes, email the practice manager, and yes, you can escalate it, but at the end of the day, is that going to get you to the next stage in that journey? And really what it is, it's about getting you to the place where you're in front of the person that can actually help you, to that specialist that really understands what you're experiencing. And so for me, I had this experience and I got on your GP and was really fortunate to finally have someone that really listened. I said, can you refer me gynecologist, to the specialist centre in Guy's Hospital, which is where I'm based, because I'm based in London. Yes, amazing. Referred me. Yes, I've been on the waiting list for months, but it was them helping me to get to that next stage within that game, within that system. So really important to not waste your energy on the things that, you're not going to fix the system. Let's just be realistic. So what you can change and what's in your control, do that. And things like getting specialist help, like looking on the BSGE, which is the, you can type in your postcode and find where a specialist center is if you have endometriosis, for example, asking just to get referred to a gynecologist. And then from that gynecologist, they can refer you to a specialist. Like, it's just about making sure that you're going through that pathway and going through that process. And then the final thing really is just to make sure that you're getting support. I think if you're navigating a diagnosis or treatment, it can be really, really difficult. Like, and a lot of people relate just hearing me say that, but it can be, devastating if you've had to have years of misdiagnosis, of not being listened to, taking you seriously, telling you it's all in your head, saying, oh, it's just stress, oh, it's just this. And actually, it's really important that we have a support system to help us along the way. And whether that be through a support group, whether that be a partner, a friend, a colleague. And again, this is why I think it goes back to making sure that we do have workspaces that are creating environments where people can feel supported with what they need outside of work. We're not robots. We don't come to work and do this and go home. We are multifaceted human beings wherever we are at any point in our life. So I think making sure that we have that support system and making sure that we're making ourselves aware of the options available. And that's one thing that I'm really passionate about. And that was why actually I started events, which is, the other side of my business. I was just looking to understand, okay, well, if you're telling me the only option is surgery or hormones, I find that quite hard to believe as someone that's worked in the healthcare system for many years. Like, you look at something like diabetes, where I think as of today, we've got about 80 different medications, billions of pounds worth of funding goes into it. And you look at the equivalent in women's health and it's like diddly squat. So actually, I think if we're able to, provide spaces where we're able to bring in, so for example, last week I had someone come and talk about acupuncture to support, endometriosis and women's health. Next week, I've got one on functional nutrition. I've had people come and speak about pelvic therapy, looking at psychological support. I mean, there's so many different things that we can look at. And that's something that I'm now, I'm on my own personal kind of journey and experience. I've just had my marina coil taken out. I've been on hormones since I was probably 14. I think, again, a lot of people can relate to that, because that's the system that we're part of. It's like, go on the pill and it's easy. And it works for a lot of people, but actually a lot of people it doesn't work. So making sure that you're educating yourself as well. And actually you should be empowered in your body to know what's going on, to advocate for yourself, and to actually take those steps to do, to explore different things, because we do have to do trial and error. Everybody is different. Everyone will react to different things. And it's really important that we're able to, until the system is able to do that for us, right? Because that's the goal, that we can go in and we're given all these options and we can have that holistic view and that solution-based approach, that preventative approach. Until that happens, ultimately, I think we need to know how important it is to be able to do that for ourselves and to make sure that we're getting the support that we need along the way.
Definitely. So adding into that, what are some ways that women can learn to advocate for themselves in their lives and in their workplaces specifically as well?
I mean, I think, to be honest, like, it goes back to, a couple of points that I said, but I think advocating for yourself is just about asking for what you want and what you need, like at its simplest form. And I think we can sort of overthink it to a certain extent when we're thinking about advocating for ourselves. And I think sometimes when we look at it in that way, it's almost like putting a lot of pressure onto you as the individual to, fight for something. And I think actually we can flip it. And it just goes back to, in life generally, we should be able to ask for what we want and need, and we should be able to speak about what it is that we care about, what we need, and just having our voice and sort of finding our voice and being able to use it and not being ashamed of it as well. I think shame is a really big issue and challenge that a lot of people
have. I was going to ask about if you think it's kind of like a lot of around stigma and things, especially when it comes to like women's health and things, that stops people from asking for what they need and what they should have.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually was speaking in Parliament last week as part of their women's health inquiry. The Women Inequalities Committee are doing an inquiry at the moment looking at women's reproductive health. And I was invited to go and give evidence about it. And that was one point that I was talking about a lot, is that actually we've normalized, like what I was saying at the beginning, women being in pain. Oh, it's just part of being a woman. Oh, you just have to get on with it. Actually, that's what we've had for generations, because we've not known any different. We've not been given the tools and the spaces to actually talk about it. And that really trickles down and it still prevails today. And I think if we could remove that stigma and we could normalize it in the same way that, if you break your leg, you're not there feeling embarrassed about it. Like, you can't tell anyone about it. Like, you have to sort of hide it. And like, it goes all the way back to, I don't know, if you need to have a tampon or a pad and you're kind of shoving it up your sleeve and like shimmying to the toilet.
Yeah, that's so true.
Like, why are we doing that? And I've done that. Like, I think a lot of people have done that because there's that shame and embarrassment of our body and just how we are. And so thinking about how to advocate for yourself, it's kind of multifaceted, right? In a lot of ways, like we need to be creating environments and a society and a culture where women's health and women and then women's bodies and their health, we could have a whole other conversation about like institutional sexism, misogyny. And,
absolutely. And the separation and stuff. Like, I'm thinking when I was at school, I remember, like, I think it was secondary school, it was like we're all about year 7, about 11, and they split the boys and the girls got all their conversations about periods and stuff, and the boys got conversations about contraception and blah blah blah. And it was like all this secret hush, like the boys didn't understand anything about periods or didn't want to hear about it, or oh, that's just for girls, oh no, we don't want to hear about it. And it's just it like seems to start at that point. So then you get the, like you say, like hiding your pad up your sleeve or to go to the toilet or whatever it is. It's really strange, isn't it, how it is like sectioned off like that from early days.
And that's why it's really important that when we're thinking about moving forward, how we can create positive change, we need to be having widespread education in schools all the way up. You don't have an hour session when you're, I don't know, 9 and that's it. You need to be having
continuous
continuous education at different stages. And that's where I think workplaces come in, because you know what you're going through when you're in work, whatever age you're at, is very different to when you're a teenager and you've just got your period and you're navigating, whatever it might be. But having all people in the room for those conversations and that education, and what if we continue to separate it and have people in different rooms learning about things that really they should be, it affects everyone. And if we can't normalize it as part of, it should be like if we're learning about maths, like there's nothing weird or uncomfortable about maths. There shouldn't be anything weird or uncomfortable about the way the human body works. It's just how it is.
It's a natural process.
Exactly. So I think, stigmatization is definitely a really, really big topic. And I think we're making progress for sure, but there is a long way to go. And that goes all the, things like having period products in toilets, and actually it should really be like toilet paper. It's not a luxury for us to have period products. And whether it's going to the gym or you're at work or whatever, if you're not prepared, you haven't got all these things, and then you could talk about the cost and accessibility and period poverty, and that's a whole other conversation. But actually, we should be creating spaces where you're not feeling stigmatized or you're not feeling out of place. You don't feel like you have to advocate for yourself, because actually it's just standardized that we have these spaces where we can do that. But I think for anyone who is struggling, I think going back to basics and really just listing out like what are the things that you want and what are the things that you need, and using that as a starting point. Having conversations with your boss if you're not comfortable to do that, having conversations with your HR, also bringing people like me in. Like sometimes it can be a case of once you talk, just a 1 hour session, it almost like opens the door a little bit. So, whether that's for International Women's Day, Endo Awareness Month, Menopause Month, Women's Health Day in May, like, pick that as a way in, or just helping to kind of get the conversation moving. It will get momentum naturally. Having people to come and support you if you want someone to come and sit in with a conversation with your boss. Like there's ways that you can get that support as well if you don't feel comfortable doing it on your own. Even sending an email, if you don't feel comfortable having that, conversation in person, sending an email, and also knowing that you don't have to divulge all of your personal medical information if you don't want to. You don't have to say any of that. But I think you're able to, there's no shame in that. So I think in some ways, the more that we can just say, look, actually, whether it's like, okay, I've got endometriosis, I'm having a bad flare up. And ultimately, we shouldn't even really be worrying about medical leave long term again, like period and things like that, because we should be addressing things at the root cause and making sure that women aren't suffering in pain and silence. So they need to have time off, right? So again, there's obviously so many different steps in it. But in the here and now, if you are struggling and you need to work from home, you need that flexibility, that should be offered you. And actually now there's like legal protections in place that are, providing flexible working and things like this. So yes, not perfect. Yes, we have the women's health strategy. Yes, actually this morning I came off a call talking about, getting involved in roundtables with various governmental parties and stakeholders in the space, because actually we really need to be looking at policies so that we can support people. It's not about saying you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. It's about giving people the tools to actually know how to navigate that wherever they're at and wherever they're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned when we were talking about this recording that sometimes health, especially like women's health, can actually hold people back. So what are some of the barriers that we're seeing because of different health conditions, and how can we overcome these?
In terms of barriers, and I guess the impact that it has on women, one thing that I talk about a lot is how women's health, and anyone struggling with women's health, be it a condition or, anything, the impact that has on women's career potential is huge. That is something that we don't really talk about very much. And that is something that I'm really passionate about, because actually, and again, this goes to like a wider issue of like looking at the amount of people who are in those like boardrooms and in leadership positions. And I think we really need to do a better job of looking at that. But the reason in some ways that we don't have women in those leadership positions is because you have a lot of women earlier on that are struggling with a health condition, and they either have to quit their job, they're fired, wrongfully dismissed. They're not able to actually do the career that they want to do because they're not given those adjustments that would allow them to do it. So you have a lot of women like me. I mean, I wanted to start a business anyway, but actually I didn't want to be in a situation where I was having to beg for time off for surgery.
Yeah, exactly.
You really want to do, but actually you don't want to be made to feel like that.
You had to do. Yeah.
And I'm, not being given those adjustments that I was asking for. That wasn't really that big of a thing that I was asking for. It feel really uncomfortable.
And it should be seen as a reasonable adjustment, really, like anything else. So
there's a lot of women that quit, start their own businesses, change careers, get jobs that they don't really enjoy, and they're not fulfilled because actually they've not been able to do it. So for me, I think it comes back to the intersections where actually the barriers that we have in terms of women not getting the appropriate diagnosis and treatment, like from a root cause approach of like what is really causing this, not just here's stronger painkillers, off you go. Actually,
what's causing it, and how do we?
And that goes back to, we need more research to really understand that. But in the now, like there is a barrier in terms of being able to get that, being able to get a diagnosis and being able to get any kind of treatment. So that is a huge barrier. And in terms of overcoming that, I do think we need to be doing a lot more research in terms of understanding, with endometriosis, nobody knows what causes it, and it affects 10% of women. If it was something like, and if you look at things like, and this isn't like a men versus women thing, but it's just the facts. Like, I think there was, I can't remember how many, but if you look up erectile dysfunction and how many publications and research have been done on that compared to women's health conditions, it just says it in the numbers. So I think really actually prioritizing women's health, only 1% of national funding goes towards women's health research. So we really need to be actually addressing things at the core, looking at different ways of diagnosing and treating and exploring alternative therapies as well. Like, we know that there are things like acupuncture that work for a lot of people, but because we don't have these large scale clinical trials, they're not recommended from the NHS. But the only recommendations that you have in the NHS, once you've tried them, you're sort of left like I've been, like, oh, you don't have any more options. So what do? You just have to be in pain all the time? No. So I think that's a really big issue in terms of really addressing that, understanding the root cause and that. And then just the wider impact. I think there's a lot of barriers that we have in terms of women's career progression and the impact that it has on our day-to-day life, be it that family life, if you're children, if you're, it shouldn't be that we're held back from doing anything that we want in life, period. So I think because health is such a barrier because of, it's all interlinked. If we can really at the start and overcome those barriers, then in future, I would like to think that we'll have generations that we don't need to have these conversations because it's normalized, it's not stigmatized. We have the solutions in place, we have the pathways in place, we have a healthcare system that actually supports society and every member of society, not just kind of selecting, certain populations, and really creating a society where there isn't the inequality that we see today and the barriers that we do have. So, yeah. I hope that answered the question.
I completely agree. You did. It did. Thank you. So I really wanted to dive into endometriosis a little bit more because obviously you're an expert in that, and it's something that obviously you have, so you're going through the experience of it and diagnosis and treatment and everything else as well. But I just feel like it's something that's not really talked enough about or known enough about. So that'd be nice just to talk a little bit more about that, and also what employers should really be knowing about that and how they can support women in the workplace. As like obviously said before, it's actually quite common considering it's so little talked about and known about.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I said before, we don't actually know the real cause. So it's always
which seems baffling to me. I just
can't really give you a proper answer.
No, of course.
But what is known? So endometriosis, the current stats that we have is that it affects 1 in 10 women and people with periods. So this isn't just women, there is also, other people who are affected by this, whether it's non-binary, trans men, and things like that. So, but yeah, it's a condition that affects 1 in 10, and it's where you have tissue that is similar to the lining of your uterus. So every month, in your uterus, if you're not, and again, this is where, like, if you're on hormonal contraceptives, it could be a little bit different. But if you're having a kind of classic menstrual cycle, if you like, you have, your lining builds up every month to prepare for an egg, a fertilized egg if you're having a baby, and if not, then it kind of sheds. That tissue, it's different, but it's similar. It basically grows outside of the uterus. So it should be inside it, and it grows outside. So it can be on your fallopian tubes, your ovaries, the outside of your womb, but it can also be found all over the body. And this is where actually, traditionally, it's thought of as a gynecological condition, but more recently, there's a lot more research that's saying it's actually more of a whole body inflammatory condition, because there are people, and in my support group alone, there's people that have it on their gut, their uterus, their liver, their lungs, their diaphragm. It can really be a full body condition. And so this is where it's really hard when it comes to diagnosis. Often it's misdiagnosed as things like appendicitis.
Because they're assuming it will be gynecological.
And I've had, as many have, colonoscopies and all of these other investigations, because no one really knows what it is. It's often misdiagnosed as IBS, because you get a lot of gut and bowel symptoms as well. So it can be really hard to diagnose, and the only way to diagnose it today in 2023 is through surgery. So we don't have a blood test, urine test. There's no way to actually get a confirmatory diagnosis. And there is some incredible research happening and innovations, but none of those are currently available, like in today. here we are today. So in future, it should be that there will be a lot easier way of doing that. And projects that I'm kind of working to support as well that are doing that. But you know, today you have to have surgery to get it. So there's also a lot of people that, because of the waiting lists, nobody is able to get, or many people are not able to get the diagnosis. And if you don't have the diagnosis, you can't have the treatment, which brings me on to treatment. And actually, from a treatment standpoint, again, unfortunately, and I'm not trying to be negative, it's just the reality. The only real way of treating it at the, you know, is to do excision surgery. So that's where you cut it out from the root. You can also have ablation, which is where you kind of laser it off. There's a lot of debate around whether you should do that, because actually it's kind of like when you pull out a weed, if you're not pulling it out with the root, then it's going to easily. So that's kind of the way it's currently done, and it's managed with hormonal contraceptives, whether that be the Mirena or kind of other contraceptive pills. All that to say, actually, in my eyes, and actually there's a lot of research now looking into it, that it's, a lot of people have this and it comes back. So that's what happened to me. I had a large endometrioma, so a big blood cyst on one of my ovaries, as well as it kind of in other places. Removed a few months later, it's come back and it's still there, and I'm kind of back to square one. That is incredibly common, and I think that we need to understand why that happens. And for me, it's about actually, well, what is the environment happening? And this is where it's really fascinating, looking at things like cancer and why is it that our immune system isn't able to take this away. And there's a lot of research into immune dysfunction, and you know, why is it not able to do that? Why aren't our bodies processing things? And that's where nutrition, looking at more of a, you know, full body functional approach, so a root cause approach of why that this is happening and it keeps coming back. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things, and that's where, like I said before, it's really about trial and error, finding what works for you. What works for one person is not going to work for others. A lot of people have endometriosis and actually have no symptoms. They don't even know they've got it until they have a cesarean section or something. So it's very heterogeneous. It affects people very, very differently. And to, I guess, answer your question around what employers should know, I think it's really just knowing this like basic information, what the most common symptoms are, which are painful periods, heavy periods, but also pain throughout the month. So not just during your period all the time. A lot of gut symptoms, so like pain when you go to the toilet, pain during sex as well, bleeding, and you know, struggles with fertility as well. That can be a way when a lot of people realize that they have it because they're struggling to get pregnant, and then they have investigation and then they realize they have it. So I think really just making people aware that it's not normal to be in pain every day, and that if that is happening, that is going to impact your work, like from a career business perspective, right? Like that affects your bottom line in a very kind of crude way of putting it, because you're not able to show up and do your job, and nobody wants that. The employer doesn't want that. The employer doesn't want that. But at the core of it, it's about making sure that women aren't dismissing their symptoms and aren't able to listen to their own bodies, and that we're able to really create those environments as employers that people can come to you, whether it's your boss, whether it's HR, to say like, look, I'm really struggling with this. Can you help me? And that comes back to, you know, things like health insurance, you know, supporting people on a one-to-one basis, however it is that you do and whatever your setup is, but really help women to get the support that they need so that they can heal themselves and get back to doing the career they love, so that they can ultimately live the life that they want to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that, Rebecca. That was really helpful. And the last thing really I had to ask was just, where can our listeners best get in touch with you and learn more?
Yeah, so I would love, like, I love chatting to anyone about anything related to women's health. So please do feel free to reach out. I get a lot of people reaching out after I do corporate sessions or podcasts and things like that.
That's great.
Want to learn more, if you want to be put in touch with someone specifically. So yeah, you can go to my Instagram. Everything's This Independent Life, so it's quite easy to remember. So yeah, Instagram at This Independent Life. Give me a follow. I post a lot about the events that I have coming up and the different activities. My podcast is also called This Independent Life, so you can get that on Apple or Spotify or most podcast places. That's where I interview different people who are doing something to support independence for women. So a lot of amazing free advice, speaking to some really incredible leaders in the space. Also on LinkedIn, I'm Rebekah Lloyd, spelled with a K-A-H, it's the funny spelling. But Rebekah Lloyd, I post a lot on there as well. And This Independent Life is the company platform on there. You can sign up to my newsletter as well. So if you go to my website, which is also thisindependentlife.co, you can sign up to that. And I kind of share, you know, things a little bit before I usually share them publicly. So that's a good place to kind of be in the know, get up to speed with things, see more behind the scenes. I think that's everything. But yeah, honestly, really happy to reach out if anyone's looking to to have someone come in and deliver a session, or you want to chat further about supporting the workplace, please reach out. All my corporate work supports my community work as well. So every corporate interaction and client that I work with, you're also supporting the community work that I do. So the events, the conferences, bringing that education to women, and kind of moving forward in terms of policy change and things like that. So work with me if you can. I would love to. I really love collaborating with people and just helping people to, you know, support themselves and their employees, and anyone really who's at a place looking for support. So please get in touch. Oh, and if you want to join the support group, if you have endometriosis, send me your phone number and I'll add you to the WhatsApp group. But yeah, thank you so much for this. I've really, I mean,
thank you.
I feel like we could keep going. I could just go on
Absolutely.
and on.
No, I really appreciated it. It was brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on, Rebekah.